My name is Natalie Wilson, and 6 months ago, my husband Ryan died in a terrible train accident. At 34, I became a widow struggling to raise our 10-year-old daughter, Emma, alone. The $250,000 apartment we'd worked so hard for was our only financial security left. I never imagined my own father would demand I give it to my sister Melanie, his favorite child. When I refused, he said I'd regret it. But nothing prepared me for returning home to find Emma sobbing, with red marks on her neck, telling me Grandpa had choked her. Before I continue this painful story, where are you watching from? Hit subscribe and like if you've ever had to protect your child from toxic family members. Ryan and I met during my second year of college. I was studying nursing and he was in engineering school. We literally bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop, resulting in my latte spilling all over his textbooks. What started as an embarrassing accident turned into him asking for my number to replace the coffee sometime. That sometime became our first date, and we were inseparable after that. Ryan had this infectious laugh that could light up any room. He was tall with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. There was something so steady about him, so dependable. Coming from my chaotic family background, his stability was like a breath of fresh air. After graduation, we both found jobs in Madison, Wisconsin. Neither of us came from money, so we rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment while saving for our own place. Ryan worked for the regional railway as an engineer, and I took a position at the local hospital. We were young and broke, but so incredibly happy. Date nights often meant cooking dinner together and watching movies on our second-hand couch, but it was perfect. 3 years into our relationship, Ryan proposed during a picnic at the park where we'd had our third date. Nothing fancy, just us, some sandwiches, and a simple ring he'd saved for months to buy. I said yes immediately. We had a small wedding with close friends, and notably absent were my parents and sister. They claimed the drive was too far, but I knew the real reason. They'd always seen Ryan as taking me away from them and their control. We continued saving, and when I found out I was pregnant with Emma, our motivation doubled. Ryan worked extra shifts and I picked up night rotations at the hospital. By the time Emma was born, we had enough for a down payment on our modest 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood with good schools. It wasn't luxurious, but it was ours, and the $250,000 property represented every sacrifice we'd made for our little family's future. Emma was the center of our world. She had Ryan's eyes and my stubborn determination. Their bond was something special to witness. Ryan would spend hours building elaborate blanket forts with her or teaching her about trains. He never missed a school event or dance recital, despite his demanding work schedule. My relationship with my own parents had always been strained. Growing up, I quickly realized that my sister Melanie was the golden child who could do no wrong. She was 3 years younger, and somehow everything came easily to her, or so my parents believed. While I worked hard for B's, her C's were celebrated. When I won second place in a science competition, my father asked why not first. When Melanie participated without placing, she received praise just for trying. Ryan was the first person who truly saw this dynamic for what it was. "It's not you, Natalie," he would say. "Nothing would ever be enough for them." He became my shield, my protector from their subtle put-downs and manipulations. With him by my side, I found the strength to establish boundaries, limiting our visits and calls to maintain my sanity. We were careful with our finances, living modestly but securely. Ryan insisted on life insurance policies for both of us just in case, though we never imagined we'd need them so soon. The policy covered our mortgage, ensuring that if anything happened to either of us, the survivor would at least have a home. The irony of Ryan dying in a train collision never escapes me. The very trains he operated safely for years took his life when another train derailed. I received the call at work. There had been an accident, and Ryan was gone. Just like that, in an instant my world shattered. The funeral was a blur of faces and hollow condolences. My parents and Melanie attended, of course. I remember my father commenting on the modest turnout, while my mother fussed over my appearance, suggesting I should have worn more makeup. Melanie hugged me and whispered, "If you need anything, just ask." But her eyes were already assessing what I had that she might want. After everyone left, the reality of being a widow at 34 with a grieving 10-year-old daughter hit me full force. Emma stopped talking for weeks. She would sit at the window, watching for her father's return despite knowing he never would. Nights were the worst. Her sobbing would eventually exhaust her into sleep, only for nightmares to wake her hours later. I functioned on autopilot. Wake up, get Emma ready for school, go to work, pick her up, make dinner, help with homework, put her to bed, cry alone, repeat. The life insurance payout covered funeral expenses and provided a small cushion, but I knew I needed to keep working. Our apartment was fully paid off now, the one financial blessing in this nightmare. But property taxes, utilities, and daily expenses remained. For 3 months we existed in this grief-filled limbo, learning to navigate a world without Ryan. I thought the worst had happened. I was wrong. The worst was yet to come, wearing the familiar faces of my own family. It was a Sunday afternoon in April when the doorbell rang. Emma was in her room working on a school project, and I was folding laundry, one of those mundane tasks that became strangely therapeutic in my grief. I opened the door to find my parents and Melanie standing there, unannounced. "Natalie dear, you look terrible," my mother said by way of greeting, air kissing my cheek as she brushed past me into the apartment. My father followed with a grunt that passed for hello, while Melanie offered a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've been worried about you," my father said, settling himself in what had been Ryan's favorite armchair without asking. "Isolated up here, just you and Emma. It's not healthy." I bit back a retort about their sudden concern after months of minimal contact. "We're managing. Emma's in therapy and I have friends checking in." My mother surveyed the apartment with a critical eye. "It's so small for the two of you. And all these maintenance issues." She gestured vaguely at a small water stain on the ceiling from a leak we'd fixed weeks ago. "Actually, it's perfect for us," I replied. "All our memories of Ryan are here." My father cleared his throat. "That's actually why we came to talk to you, Natalie. About the apartment." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I sat down slowly on the couch, facing them. "What about it?" "Your sister is pregnant," my mother announced, beaming at Melanie. "With twins. Can you believe it? They'll need more space." Melanie placed a hand on her still flat stomach, nodding. "Jason and I are so excited, but our rental is barely 1 bedroom. We can't fit 2 cribs." I congratulated her automatically, still not understanding what this had to do with my apartment until my father leaned forward, hands clasped. "We think you should transfer the apartment to Melanie," he stated flatly. "She needs it more than you do." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Excuse me? It makes perfect sense." My mother chimed in. "This place is fully paid off thanks to Ryan's life insurance. You and Emma could easily find a smaller rental or move back closer to us. Melanie has 2 babies coming." "This is our home," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Ryan and I worked for years to afford it." My father's expression hardened. "Don't be selfish, Natalie. You've always thought only of yourself. Your sister has a family to consider." "I have a family too." I stood up, hands shaking. "My daughter, who just lost her father. This apartment is her stability, her security." "You're being dramatic," my mother sighed. "Emma's young, she'll adjust." The conversation flashed me back to my childhood every time I had wanted something that Melanie eventually got instead. The bicycle I saved my allowance for, given to her because she needed exercise more. The college fund that mysteriously dwindled, because Melanie's dance lessons were an investment in her future. Always Melanie's needs above mine. "This isn't about Emma at all," I said, pieces clicking into place. "This is about Melanie wanting something that's mine." Again Melanie's eyes welled with tears on cue. "That's not fair, Nat. We're struggling and you have this whole apartment to yourself." "An apartment my husband and I paid for," I countered. "With our money, our sacrifices. Ryan wanted this to be Emma's security." My father stood, towering over me just like when I was a child. "Your husband is gone, Natalie. It's time to think about the living, about family." "Emma is my family," I said firmly. "And I'm not giving up her home." His face flushed dark red. "After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me?" I interrupted, something I'd never dared do before. "When Ryan died, you barely called. When Emma stopped talking for weeks, you sent a generic sympathy card. Now you want her home. You ungrateful." He caught himself as Emma appeared in the hallway, drawn by our raised voices. "Mom," she called, her small voice uncertain. "It's okay, sweetie," I assured her. "Go back to your room. I'll be there in a minute." My father's voice dropped to a menacing whisper once Emma was out of earshot. This isn't over, Natalie. You've always been difficult, but this takes the cake. There are consequences for this kind of selfishness. Are you threatening me? I asked incredulously. I'm reminding you that family takes care of family, he replied. And right now, you're not acting like family. My mother stood, straightening her designer blouse. Think about it, Natalie. Melanie has always been there for you. I laughed bitterly. When? Name one time. Nobody answered. Melanie gathered her purse, tears still streaming. I thought you'd want to help us. I guess I was wrong about you. They left in a chorus of slammed doors and muttered criticisms. I stood frozen in my living room, Ryan's absence never feeling more acute. He would have known exactly what to say, how to stand firm without shaking like I was. Emma crept back out. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? I pulled her into a hug. No, sweetie. They're just upset about grown-up things. Nothing for you to worry about. But as I held her, I could feel a knot of anxiety forming. My father's veiled threats echoed in my mind. I had never stood up to him like this before. And something told me he wouldn't let it go easily. I just never imagined how far he would go to punish me for it. The harassment began the very next day. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my parents, Melanie, and soon, extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Your father is so disappointed in you, my mother texted. After all we've sacrificed. Those babies deserve a safe home, wrote my Aunt Diane, who had never even met Emma. Family helps family from my Uncle Gerald, who hadn't sent so much as a condolence card when Ryan died. Melanie's messages were the most manipulative. I don't know where we'll put the cribs now. Jason might have to work 2 jobs. I hope you're happy. I blocked numbers after a while, but they would call from different phones or ambush me on social media. At first, I tried explaining my position rationally, but soon realized they weren't interested in my perspective. The narrative had already been established. Selfish Natalie denying her poor pregnant sister a home for her babies. A week after their visit, I met with my friend Amanda for coffee. She'd been my rock since Ryan's death, dropping by with groceries when I couldn't face the store, sitting with me through nights when grief made sleep impossible. They want you to give up your paid-off apartment so your sister can have it, she repeated incredulously. That's insane. My father made it sound like my moral obligation, I said, stirring my coffee absently. Like I'm some monster for wanting to keep a roof over my daughter's head. Amanda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're not crazy, Nat. This is beyond inappropriate. Have you spoken to a lawyer? I hadn't, but her suggestion prompted me to make an appointment with a family attorney the following day. Michael Dawson was a kind-faced man in his 50s who listened carefully to my situation. Legally speaking, they don't have a leg to stand on, he assured me. The apartment is solely in your name now that Ryan's passed. You're under no obligation to transfer it to anyone. What about their claims that I owe them? I asked. He shook his head. Unless they loaned you money specifically for the apartment with documented repayment terms, that's just emotional manipulation, not a legal obligation. His confirmation bolstered my resolve, but the pressure from my family only intensified. My father escalated to contacting my workplace. I arrived at the hospital one morning to find my supervisor, Janet, waiting for me with a concerned expression. Natalie, I received a strange call from someone claiming to be your father, she said. He implied you were emotionally unstable since your husband's death, and suggested we keep an eye on you. Is everything okay? My face burned with humiliation as I explained the situation. Janet was understanding, but the damage was done. Whispers followed me through the halls that day, and I caught colleagues giving me sympathetic glances. My father had managed to make me look unstable at the one place I felt competent. Emma began showing signs of stress too. Her teacher called to say she'd been withdrawn in class and had started biting her nails again, a nervous habit she'd overcome years ago. One night, I found her sitting on Ryan's side of the bed, clutching his old sweater. Grandpa says we might have to move, she whispered. He called me yesterday. My blood ran cold. He called you? On what phone? School phone. During recess. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to leave Daddy's home, Mom. I held her tightly, fury building inside me. We're not going anywhere, Emma. Promise. The next day, I called the school and revoked all contact privileges for my parents. The administrator seemed confused. They're on your emergency contact list, she pointed out. Not anymore, I said firmly, updating the forms to list only Amanda and my neighbor Sarah instead. But the isolation was growing. Some friends began to distance themselves, uncomfortable with what they perceived as family drama. My cousin Jessica, once close, texted, "Maybe you should consider what's best for everyone, not just yourself." My mother had clearly been making calls. By the 6-week mark, my determination was wavering under the constant assault. I found myself lying awake at night, wondering if it would be easier to give in. Maybe we could find another place. Maybe Emma would adjust. Maybe peace with my family was worth the sacrifice. Then I'd remember Ryan. Never let them make you doubt yourself, he told me countless times. Your instincts are right. They're the ones who are broken. I made an appointment with Emma's therapist, Dr. Bennett, to discuss the situation. Emma's processing her father's death, she explained gently. Stability is crucial right now. Moving her from the home she shared with him, especially under these circumstances, could significantly impact her grief process. So I'm right to stand my ground? I asked, needing the validation. From a psychological perspective, protecting Emma's sense of security is your priority, she confirmed. The apartment represents more than walls and a roof to her. It's where her memories of her father live. Armed with renewed determination, I drafted a clear message to my family. The apartment stays with Emma and me. This is not up for discussion. Further harassment will result in legal action. My father's response was chilling. You've made your choice. Remember that choices have consequences. I showed the message to Michael, who advised documenting all communication and considering a restraining order if they attempted to contact me at work again. But as I left his office, I couldn't shake the feeling that legal protection wouldn't be enough. My father wasn't someone who accepted defeat gracefully, and I had just publicly defied him for perhaps the first time in my life. What I didn't know was how quickly and viciously he would retaliate, and that my innocent daughter would bear the brunt of his rage. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, halfway through my shift at the hospital. The emergency department had been chaotic all day. A multi-car accident had brought in several critical patients, and we were short-staffed. Janet approached me as I was updating a patient's chart. "Natalie, I hate to ask this, but can you stay for the evening shift? Becky's child is sick, and we're desperate for coverage." I hesitated, thinking of Emma. She was supposed to go home with her friend Lily after school, but Lily's mother had texted earlier that Lily was coming down with something. "I need to figure out childcare for Emma first," I explained. After several frantic calls, my neighbor Sarah agreed to watch Emma until 6, but couldn't stay later due to her own evening plans. I was about to decline the extra shift when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Heard you need someone to watch Emma tonight. We could pick her up from Sarah's. Might be good for her to spend time with family." I stared at the message, suspicion warring with desperation. They hadn't spoken to me directly in weeks, communicating only through passive-aggressive messages and flying monkeys. Why the sudden offer to help? But I was out of options. Sarah could only stay until 6, and the hospital needed me. Maybe this was my parents' way of extending an olive branch. Maybe Melanie's pregnancy hormones had settled, and they'd realized their demands were unreasonable. "Just for tonight," I texted back. "Please have her in bed by 9. She has school tomorrow." Of course, came the swift reply. "We know how to take care of our granddaughter." With childcare arranged, I confirmed I could stay, pushing aside the nagging worry in my gut. Ryan would have called it my danger radar, the instinct that always alerted me when my parents were planning something. But I ignored it, telling myself I was being paranoid. For hours into the extended shift, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Emma. "Mom, please come home." Just 3 words, but something about them sent ice through my veins. Emma never texted so formally. Our messages were usually filled with emojis and abbreviations. This felt different. Wrong. I called immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted back. "Are you okay? What's happening?" No response. I called my parents' phone. No answer. Called their home line. No answer. The danger radar was blaring now. I approached Janet, showing her the text. "I need to go. Something's wrong with my daughter." She took one look at my face and nodded. "Go. We'll manage." I drove home in a blur, running every red light, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Our apartment was dark when I arrived, no sign of my parents' car. Using my key, I burst through the door. "Emma?" I called, flipping on lights. A small sound came from her bedroom, a hiccuping sob. I found her curled into a ball on her bed, face streaked with tears, clutching her stuffed rabbit, the one Ryan had given her on her 5th birthday. "Baby, what happened? Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" She looked up, and that's when I saw it. Angry red marks around her neck like fingerprints. Her scalp was red and irritated in patches, and a small clump of hair lay on her pillow. "Grandpa got mad," she whispered, her voice raspy. "He said I was being disrespectful just like you." My world tunneled to a pinpoint of rage as she told me what happened. My parents had picked her up from Sarah's as planned, but brought her to their house instead of our apartment. My father had immediately started questioning her about our home, asking if I'd been talking to lawyers or saying bad things about family. When Emma, confused, said she just wanted to go home, he'd erupted. He grabbed her by the neck, shoving her against the wall, telling her she was ungrateful just like her mother. When she tried to pull away, he yanked her hair so hard that chunks came out in his hand. He said it was my fault you wouldn't give Aunt Melanie our apartment. Emma sobbed. That you were teaching me to be selfish, and he needed to teach me a lesson. My mother had stood by, telling Emma to stop exaggerating, and that your grandfather is just upset. When Emma managed to get to the bathroom and lock the door, she texted me from the phone I'd given her for emergencies. My father had pounded on the door, threatening to break it down, but eventually they'd driven her home in tense silence, dropping her off with a warning, "Don't make things worse by lying to your mother." As she spoke, I took photos of her injuries, the fingerprint bruises darkening on her neck, the patches of missing hair, the scratch on her cheek where his wedding ring had caught her skin. Each image fueled a rage I'd never experienced before, something primal and dangerous. "Did they hurt you anywhere else?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. She shook her head. "Grandma just watched. Aunt Melanie was there too. She looked scared but didn't say anything." That detail, my sister witnessing my child being abused and remaining silent, was the final betrayal. Any lingering doubt about cutting ties with my family vanished in that moment. I called 911, reporting the assault. While waiting for police, I held Emma, rocking her gently as she drifted into exhausted sleep. My phone exploded with messages from my parents. "Emma is being dramatic. I barely touched her. This is what happens when you raise a child without discipline. If you'd just been reasonable about the apartment, none of this would have happened." That last message I saved as evidence, an implicit admission of what they'd done and why. When Officer Keith arrived, he took initial statements and photos. "You'll want to take her to the ER," he advised, "for documentation and to check for any internal injuries." I nodded numbly, gathering Emma's things. As we prepared to leave for the hospital, the officer asked, "Ma'am, do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" Sometimes in these situations, the perpetrators return. The question jolted me. This was our home, our sanctuary. But now it felt vulnerable, exposed. "We'll figure something out," I said, not wanting to burden Amanda with 2 overnight guests. "Mom," Emma whispered as I buckled her into the car. I recorded it on my tablet. When Grandpa was yelling and grabbing me, I hit the record button like you showed me for my video diary. My hands froze on the seatbelt. "You recorded it?" She nodded weakly. "It's in my backpack. I thought you might need proof, since Grandma and Grandpa lie a lot." In that moment, despite everything, I felt a surge of pride for my brave, resourceful daughter. At 10 years old, she'd had the presence of mind to create evidence, knowing adults might not believe her otherwise. "You did exactly right," I told her, kissing her forehead. "You're the bravest person I know, Emma Wilson." As we drove to the hospital, I made a silent vow. No one would ever hurt my child again. Not family, not anyone. The apartment, the inheritance disputes, all of it seemed trivial now compared to Emma's safety and healing. What I didn't realize then was that the recording would change everything. Not just legally, but within our extended family circle. The undeniable evidence of my father's abuse would shatter the carefully constructed image he'd maintained for decades. And it would finally set us free. The emergency room was mercifully quiet when we arrived. The triage nurse, a woman named Beth with kind eyes and efficient hands, took one look at Emma's neck and immediately ushered us into a private examination room. Suspected non-accidental trauma, she said into the phone, using clinical language that couldn't disguise the ugly reality my child had been assaulted by her grandfather. Dear. Patricia Reynolds arrived minutes later, her manner gentle but thorough as she examined Emma. I need to document everything, she explained to both of us. It might feel uncomfortable, but it's important for the record. Emma sat stoically as the doctor photographed her injuries, measured the bruises on her neck, and noted the patches of missing hair. Winder. Reynolds asked her to describe what happened. Emma's voice wavered but didn't break. Grandpa got mad because Mom won't give our apartment to Aunt Melanie, she said simply. He said he needed to teach me not to be selfish like Mom. The doctor's expression remained neutral, but I caught the flash of anger in her eyes. Did he say anything else while he was hurting you? Emma nodded. He said Mom was poisoning me against the family, that I needed to learn respect. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He said if Mom kept being difficult, there would be worse consequences. Dear. Reynolds made notes, then turned to me. We'll need to do a full workup, X-rays of her neck and skull to check for any structural damage. The bruising pattern suggests significant force was applied. As Emma was taken for imaging, I sat alone in the examination room, the weight of guilt crushing me. I had left my child with people I knew were manipulative and vindictive, all because I needed to work an extra shift. The rational part of me knew they were the abusers, not me, but the mother in me couldn't stop the spiral of self-recrimination. Officer Keith arrived at the hospital to take formal statements. I've spoken with the district attorney, he informed me. Given the victim's age and the nature of the assault, they're taking this very seriously. I handed him Emma's tablet. My daughter recorded the incident. I haven't listened to it yet, I don't think I can, but she says everything is on there. He nodded, placing the tablet in an evidence bag. This could be crucial. We'll have our tech team extract the audio professionally to preserve the chain of evidence. Emma returned from radiology, looking small and exhausted on the gurney. The X-rays had shown no fractures, but the doctor recommended monitoring for concussion symptoms due to how forcefully she'd been pushed against the wall. She should rest for the next 48 hours, Dar. Reynolds advised. And I'm prescribing a mild anti-anxiety medication to help with sleep. Trauma like this can cause nightmares, flashbacks. I nodded, mentally calculating sick days I could take from work to stay home with her. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah, our neighbor. Just heard police at your parents' house. Everything okay? Emma all right? I texted back a brief explanation, and her response was immediate. Come stay with me tonight. Spare room is made up. No arguments. It was nearly midnight when we finally left the hospital, armed with discharge papers that clinically documented the assault. Emma fell asleep in the car, and I carried her to Sarah's spare bedroom, tucking her in without waking her. Sarah waited in her kitchen with tea and a sympathetic ear. I should have known something was wrong when they insisted on picking her up, she said, shaking her head. Your father seemed so smug. You couldn't have known, I assured her, though part of me wished she'd sensed the danger I'd ignored. None of us thought he'd hurt a child. My phone had been buzzing constantly. Messages from my mother claiming misunderstanding and overreaction. From my father, thinly veiled threats about what happens when you involve authorities in family matters. From Melanie, tearful voice messages begging me to work this out privately. I silenced the phone and set it aside. I can't deal with them right now. Sarah nodded. You need a lawyer. Not just for the criminal case, you need protection from these people. The next morning, Officer Keith called. Wilson, we've extracted the audio from your daughter's tablet. The district attorney would like you to come in to listen to it and give a statement. I arranged for Emma to stay with Sarah, then drove to the police station, my stomach in knots. Detective Jennifer Morales met me in a small conference room, her expression grave. The recording is about 18 minutes long, she explained. I should warn you, it's disturbing. Your daughter was very brave and very smart to capture this. She pressed play and my father's voice filled the room. Harsh, menacing in a way I recognized from my own childhood. Your mother thinks she's so clever, getting lawyers involved. She wants to keep that apartment all to herself while your aunt has to raise twins in a shoebox. Emma's small voice, I don't know about any lawyers. I just want to go home. The sound of something hitting a wall. Emma's frightened gasp. Don't you walk away when I'm talking to you. That's exactly the disrespect your mother's teaching you. Rustling sounds. Emma's sudden cry of pain. Grandpa, you're hurting me. Sometimes pain is the only way people learn. Your mother needs to understand there are consequences for defying family. The sounds that followed would haunt me for years. My daughter gasping for breath, begging him to stop. The unmistakable sound of hair being torn from her scalp. My mother's voice. In the background, not intervening, but telling Emma to stop being so dramatic. And then, most damning of all, my father's explicit connection of the assault to the apartment dispute. If your mother had just signed over that apartment like she was told, none of this would be happening. This is her fault. Tell her that. Tell her what happens when she's selfish. The recording continued with Emma's escape to the bathroom. Her frightened breathing as she hid. The pounding on the door. More threats. By the time it ended, tears streamed down my face, and Detective Morales silently pushed a box of tissues toward me. Wilson, this is one of the clearest cases of assault and child abuse I've heard documented. Your father explicitly connected the attack to your refusal to transfer property to your sister. That makes this not just assault, but attempted coercion. She paused, giving me time to compose myself. The district attorney is pursuing charges of child abuse, assault, and attempted coercion. We'll be arresting your father today, and your mother will be charged as an accessory. I nodded, unable to speak. We're also processing an emergency restraining order that will cover both you and Emma. Your parents and sister will not be permitted to contact you or come within 500 feet of your home, workplace, or Emma's school. As I left the police station, my phone rang. Michael Dawson, the family attorney I'd consulted earlier. Natalie, I've been contacted by the DA's office about your case, he said. I'd like to help you file for a permanent restraining order and navigate the upcoming legal proceedings. And I think we should discuss a civil suit as well. Later that afternoon, Sarah called me at Michael's office, her voice urgent. Natalie, your parents and sister just tried to enter your apartment. I saw them from my window and called the police. They're claiming they need to collect Emma's things for her extended stay with them. The audacity was staggering. Even with criminal charges pending, they were still trying to exert control, still operating under the delusion that they had rights to my child and home. They were turned away, Sarah continued. But I thought you should know they're escalating, not backing down. That evening, as Emma slept fitfully in Sarah's spare room, I sat with my laptop reviewing the legal documents Michael had prepared. Protection orders, victim impact statements, civil complaints, the formal language attempting to capture the emotional devastation of betrayal by one's own family. A text arrived from an unknown number. This is Thomas, Melanie's husband. We need to talk about what happened. Not all of us support what your father did. Call me if you want to know the whole story. I stared at the message, unsure whether it was another manipulation tactic or a genuine reach across the widening family divide. Either way, it suggested the unified front my parents had presented was beginning to crack. The truth, captured in an audio file by a 10-year-old girl brave enough to think clearly in her moment of terror, was starting to ripple outward. And I realized that the apartment, the object of so much conflict, had faded in importance compared to the more fundamental question of who could be trusted with my daughter's well-being. Not my parents. Not my sister. Those bridges weren't just burned. They were obliterated by the sound of my child gasping for breath in her grandfather's grip. We'll get through this. I whispered to Emma's sleeping form, gently touching her bruised neck. And we'll rebuild on our own terms. What I didn't yet understand was how many others would join us in that rebuilding. Allies emerging from unexpected corners as the full story came to light. District Attorney Jennifer Harris was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with short-cropped hair and a reputation for aggressively prosecuting cases involving children. When we met in her office 3 days after the assault, she didn't mince words. The recording your daughter made is damning, she said, arranging files on her desk. We've charged your father with child abuse, assault, and attempted coercion. Your mother is charged as an accessory for failing to intervene and later attempting to cover up the incident. What about my sister? I asked. Emma said she was there too. The Harris nodded. We're still determining her level of involvement. If she was merely present or if she participated in planning the assault, the charges would differ. I thought of Thomas's text still unanswered on my phone. Perhaps he held those answers. What should we expect going forward? I asked. Your parents will likely attempt to minimize what happened. They've already hired Preston Williams, an aggressive defense attorney known for attacking victims' credibility. My stomach dropped. They're going to attack Emma's credibility? She's 10. Unfortunately, that's standard procedure in cases like this. They'll claim she's been coached, that her injuries were self-inflicted or accidental, that the recording was edited. She leaned forward. That's why the medical documentation is so important and why Emma should continue with her therapist. Dear Bennett's professional assessment will carry weight. As predicted, my parents' first move was a public offensive. Through their attorney, they released a statement painting me as an emotionally unstable widow, using my daughter to manipulate family sympathies in a property dispute. They claimed my father had merely restrained Emma during a tantrum, and that I was manufacturing abuse allegations to avoid family obligations. The statement made local news, where reporters ambushed me outside the hospital after a shift. A mess. Wilson, is it true you're fabricating abuse claims to keep property from your pregnant sister? One shouted, thrusting a microphone toward me. I froze, unprepared for the public spectacle. Amanda appeared at my side, shielding me as we hurried to my car. Vultures, she muttered. Don't engage with them. The following day, Emma's school counselor, Madison Taylor, called. Emma had a difficult day, she explained gently. Some children repeated things their parents had seen on the news. She became very upset. My heart sank. The ugliness was seeping into every aspect of our lives. Should I keep her home? I asked, already mentally rearranging my work schedule. Actually, I think routine is important right now, Madison advised. But I wanted to let you know I've spoken with her teachers. We're monitoring the situation closely and implementing a zero-tolerance policy for any discussion of the case. Her support was a small bright spot in an increasingly dark situation. As news of the charges spread, our community divided. Criticism and rejection, she received conditional approval dependent on compliance. The apartment demand hadn't originated with her at all, but with my father, who had convinced her she was entitled to it. She's a mess right now, Thomas admitted. Pregnant. Terrified of your father. Guilty about Emma. Worried about jail. I'm trying to convince her to speak with the DA, tell the whole truth. His revelations aligned with what Uncle Robert had said about the golden child's burden. I felt a flicker of sympathy for my sister, though it wasn't enough to outweigh my anger at her complicity in Emma's assault. If she cooperates fully, I won't push for charges against her, I said finally. But I need her to tell the truth, all of it. 2 days later, Melanie met with the DA, providing a sworn statement that corroborated Emma's account and revealed additional details about my father's premeditated plan to teach me a lesson through my daughter. Her testimony strengthened the prosecution's case considerably. As the preliminary hearing approached, Emma's school counselor called again, this time with unexpected news. Emma spoke in class today, Madison said, a note of cautious optimism in her voice. During circle time, when the children were discussing courage, she shared her experience. She said she was nervous about the upcoming court date, but felt brave knowing she was telling the truth. Pride mixed with heartache at the image of my 10-year-old finding courage to face a courtroom. How did the other kids respond? With remarkable compassion, Madison said. They asked thoughtful questions, offered support. Children often have a clearer sense of right and wrong than adults, clouded by social complications. That clarity was evident at the preliminary hearing, where Judge Simmons ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. My father, seeing the writing on the wall as the recording was played in court, made a last-ditch effort to regain control. Through his attorney, he offered a plea deal. He would plead guilty to reduce charges of reckless endangerment if I would drop the restraining order and resume normal family relations. Dia. Harris brought the offer to me with obvious disdain. This is technically a better deal for us in terms of guaranteed conviction, she explained. But it comes with strings attached that I find inappropriate. The decision is yours. I thought of Emma's bruised neck, her missing hair, her nightmares that still woke her screaming weeks later. I thought of my own childhood, walking on eggshells around my father's temper. I thought of Uncle Robert's revelations and Melanie's fearful compliance. No deal, I said firmly. Some actions can't be undone with a handshake and a promise to play nice. Emma deserves better. I deserve better. The decision to proceed to trial triggered another wave of community response. A local parenting blog published an anonymous letter from a mother claiming similar experiences with my father years earlier, when he coached youth soccer. A former business partner came forward with allegations of threatening behavior. The carefully constructed public image continued to crumble. Amanda organized a small support rally outside the courthouse on the day of jury selection. The sight of 24 people holding signs reading, "We believe Emma and stand against child abuse," brought tears to my eyes. But the most unexpected support came from Emma's school. Her entire 5th grade class, with parental permission and teacher supervision, created a Courage quilt fabric squares with messages of support that Madison delivered to our apartment. The children wanted Emma to have something tangible to hold on to during difficult days. She explained something to remind her she's not alone. That night, as Emma traced her fingers over the colorful squares, she looked up at me with the first genuine smile I'd seen in weeks. "I'm not scared anymore, Mom," she said softly. "Not when so many people know the truth." In that moment, I realized something fundamental had shifted. We had begun this journey isolated and vulnerable, facing a unified front of family pressure and manipulation. Now, surrounded by a growing community of support, the power dynamic had reversed. My father, once so confident in his ability to control the narrative, found himself increasingly alone as the truth emerged. And Emma and I, once desperate to maintain the security of our physical home, had discovered something more valuable. A chosen family of friends, professionals, and even estranged relatives who formed a stronger foundation than the apartment's walls ever could. The trial was still to come, with all its potential for trauma and difficulty. But for the first time since Ryan's death, I felt genuinely hopeful about our future, whatever shape it might take. The morning of the trial, Emma sat at our kitchen table, carefully selecting her outfit, a purple dress Ryan had bought for her last birthday, with a matching headband to cover the spots where her hair was still growing back. "Do you think Daddy knows what's happening today?" she asked, adjusting the headband in the mirror. The question caught me off guard. We'd spoken often about Ryan since his death, but this was the first time she'd wondered about his awareness of our current struggles. I think I said carefully that if there's any way for him to know, he does. "And he'd be so proud of you, Emma. So incredibly proud." She nodded, satisfied with this answer and with her reflection. "I'm ready." But we never made it to trial. As we prepared to leave for the courthouse, Michael called with unexpected news. "Your father's taking a plea deal," he said, sounding surprised himself. "Full admission of guilt to child abuse and assault. No reduced charges." "What changed?" I asked, stunned by the sudden capitulation. "Two things. First, 3 more witnesses came forward yesterday with accounts of your father's abusive behavior in other contexts. Second, and I think this was the deciding factor, your sister agreed to testify against him." According to Michael, Melanie had finally broken free of our father's influence, providing prosecutors with detailed accounts of psychological abuse stretching back years. The statement she prepared described how our father had systematically pitted us against each other, using Melanie's favored status to control her while isolating me. "The sentencing hearing is set for next week." Michael continued. "You and Emma should prepare victim impact statements if you're comfortable doing so." I relayed the news to Emma, carefully explaining what it meant. "Grandpa is admitting he hurt you. There won't be a trial where you have to tell your story to strangers." Relief flooded her face. "So it's over?" "Almost," I said, pulling her into a hug. "There's still the sentencing. That's when the judge decides what happens to Grandpa. But you don't have to be there if you don't want to." She thought for a moment, then squared her small shoulders. "I want to go. I want to tell the judge how it felt when he hurt me." With help from Dr. Bennett, Emma crafted a statement that broke my heart with its clarity and courage. On the day of the sentencing, she stood before Judge Simmons, her voice clear despite her nerves. "When my grandpa hurt me, I was scared that nobody would believe me because grown-ups often believe other grown-ups more than kids," she read from her carefully written notes. "I had nightmares where I couldn't breathe, and I was afraid to go to school because I thought he might come find me. But the worst part wasn't the pain or the scary feelings. The worst part was that my grandpa, who is supposed to love me, hurt me because he was mad at my mom. I don't think people should hurt kids ever, especially not to punish someone else." Judge Simmons, a grandmother herself, according to courthouse rumors, thanked Emma for her bravery before turning her attention to my father. "Mr. Wilson, in my 30 years on the bench, I've seen many cases of family violence, she said, her voice stern. What distinguishes yours is the calculated nature of your attack on a child for the specific purpose of controlling her mother. This was not a momentary loss of control, but a deliberate attempt to use violence against a child as leverage in a property dispute. The court cannot and will not tolerate such behavior. She sentenced him to 5 years in prison with a permanent restraining order protecting both Emma and me upon his release. My mother received probation for her role as an accessory, with mandatory counseling and no-contact orders. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. I had avoided media throughout the process, but now with Emma's hand firmly in mine, I decided to make one brief statement. Today isn't about victory, I told the assembled press. It's about accountability and protection. No child should ever be hurt by those who claim to love them. No parent should ever have to choose between family loyalty and their child's safety. We're grateful for the court's decision and ask for privacy as we begin to heal. That healing process would prove to be a winding road with unexpected turns. 2 weeks after the sentencing, Melanie asked to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. I agreed, with Thomas present as a buffer. She looked different, smaller somehow, without our father's domineering presence behind her. The pregnancy was beginning to show, her hand resting protectively on her bump as she struggled to meet my eyes. I don't expect forgiveness, she began, her voice shaking. What happened to Emma is unforgivable, and I was part of it by not stopping it, by not warning you. I stayed silent, waiting. I've started therapy, she continued, trying to understand why I went along with Dad for so long, why I believed I deserved your home just because he said so. She paused. The twins are girls and I keep thinking about how I want to raise them differently, without the competition, without the constant fear of disappointing their grandfather. It wasn't an immediate reconciliation. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be repaired in a single conversation. But it was a beginning. A small crack in the wall between us that might someday allow for a different kind of relationship. Not the forced closeness our parents had demanded, but something more honest. As spring turned to summer, Emma and I faced a difficult decision about the apartment. Though we'd fought so hard to keep it, the place held complicated memories now. Emma admitted that she sometimes imagined her grandfather's hands around her throat when she walked through the living room where we'd argued that fateful day. Would it be giving up if we moved? I asked Dear Bennett during a joint therapy session. Moving from a location doesn't mean surrendering what you fought for, she replied thoughtfully. You fought for autonomy, for the right to make your own decisions about your property and lives. Using that autonomy to choose a fresh start isn't giving up. It's exercising the very freedom you defended. With that perspective, we decided to sell. The housing market had improved since Ryan's death, and the apartment sold quickly for considerably more than the $250,000 it had been worth initially. The irony wasn't lost on me. Had my father simply left us alone, the natural course of the market would have provided more than enough for a down payment on a new place for Melanie without taking Emma's security. We found a small house in a neighboring suburb with a yard for Emma to play in and good schools nearby. As we packed, Emma sorted through her father's belongings that we'd kept, deciding what to bring to our new home. Not everything, she decided, setting aside some items. Just the special things that make me happy when I see them. The sad memories can stay behind. From her 10-year-old wisdom, I tried to learn. Ryan's death had left a hole in our lives that would never fully close, but we could choose which memories to carry forward, and which painful associations to leave behind. The unexpected bright spot in this difficult transition came in the form of a letter, delivered by certified mail from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was notification that Ryan's estranged grandmother, a woman he'd barely mentioned during our marriage, had passed away months earlier. With no other descendants, she had left her modest estate to Ryan, which now transferred to Emma and me. The inheritance wasn't life-changing, but it provided a financial cushion that allowed me to reduce my hours at the hospital temporarily, spending more time with Emma during her crucial healing process. It felt like Ryan was still taking care of us in his way. By fall, we were settled in our new home. Emma had started at her new school, where she made friends quickly and joined the drama club, finding her voice in more ways than one. I had connected with a support group for single parents, finding community with others navigating similar challenges. Amanda remained our rock, Sunday dinners at her house, becoming a cherished tradition. Uncle Robert and his wife became regular visitors, filling in the family history gaps with stories of Ryan's kindness that our parents had never acknowledged. Even Thomas and Melanie maintained cautious contact, sending birthday cards and occasional updates on the twins' development. My mother, facing her own reckoning, began attending therapy sessions separately from my father. Her letters, initially defensive and self-pitying, gradually showed glimmers of genuine reflection. While reconciliation remained a distant possibility rather than an immediate goal, the door wasn't completely closed. One evening in late October, Emma and I sat on our new porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She leaned against me, comfortable in the silence we shared. "Mom," she said finally, "remember when you asked if I thought Dad knows what's happening to us?" I nodded, throat tightening at the memory. "I think he does," she continued. "And I think he'd be happy about our new home. Not because it's bigger or because the old one had bad memories, but because we chose it together. 'Cause we're okay." I hugged her close, marveling at the resilience of this child who had endured so much. The loss of her father, the betrayal of family, the physical assault, the public scrutiny, and still found her way to wisdom and healing. "We are okay," I agreed. "And we're going to stay that way." Later that night, after Emma was asleep, I sat at my computer and started typing. The story poured out of me not just the recent trauma, but the lifetime of manipulation and control that had preceded it. The subtle and not-so-subtle ways my parents had undermined my confidence, pitted siblings against each other, used love as a weapon and withdrawal as punishment. When I finished, I created a blog called Breaking Cycles and, with a deep breath, published my first post. Not for revenge or public vindication, but for the other Emmas and Natalies out there struggling to recognize abuse patterns disguised as family loyalty. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments and messages flooded in from others sharing similar experiences, seeking advice, offering support. What began as personal catharsis evolved into a community resource, and eventually a nonprofit organization providing legal and psychological support to families escaping toxic dynamics. 2 years after that terrible day when I found Emma with bruises on her neck, we stood together at a fundraising gala for Breaking Cycles. Now 12, Emma had been instrumental in developing the organization's youth program, creating resources specifically for children navigating family courts and protective services. "I have a question for everyone watching this story," Emma said, looking directly into the camera as we recorded our story for the organization's website. "What would you do to protect someone you love? Would you stand up to your family? Would you leave behind a home full of memories? Would you rebuild your life from scratch?" I watched my daughter speak with such clarity and conviction and felt Ryan would indeed be proud, not just of her courage in facing trauma, but of how she transformed that trauma into purpose. "We made difficult choices," I added, "but they were the right ones." If you're watching this and facing similar impossible decisions, know that you're not alone. There is life, good life, on the other side of standing up for yourself and your children. The apartment that once seemed worth threatening a child over had long since faded in importance. What remained was what truly mattered: Emma's healing, our relationship, and the family we chose to build around us, not of blood obligation, but of genuine love and respect. If you've ever had to make difficult choices to protect yourself or someone you love, share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about breaking cycles of abuse and building healthier relationships. Thank you for watching, and remember, your worth is never measured by what others try to take from you, but by your courage to stand for what's right.